like, "Oh my god, I'm totally glad you're here this week." What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. It is Monday, June 5th, 2023. And no, you have not been transported back to the 80s. It is Project Joy Live. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas. Super excited to be with you today. Okay. I am the queen of joy and super thrilled to be here with you this morning. I am so glad that you're joining us, and I want you to get your leg warmers, tease your hair, get your Walkman, get going. Okay, listen, I had hair and makeup behind the scenes this morning. Do you see this? Right? It's a whole vibe over here today. I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to be talking about 80s all week, and this kicks off our Battle of the Decade series. Now, what does this mean? Actually, it was inspired by this card game that my kids have called Battle of the Decades. It was something that I had found from them, I think, a couple Christmases ago or something like that, and there's questions from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. And I was totally inspired by this game. And I said, we're going to do this on Project Joy Live. So it's going to be so much fun all week long. I hope you'll be joining us. And I'm going to give you kind of the breakdown a little bit. So on Mondays, I'm going to be sharing with you the top news of the decade that we're talking about. So today we'll be talking about the top news of the 80s. On Tuesdays, it's going to be Trivia Tuesdays, and you'll actually have a chance. The more you participate, the more fun it's going to be. So when you participate in the audience, you could actually win a prize. And we're going to be talking about trivia for each decade that we're doing. So be answering those questions. Doesn't matter if you're right, just be participating. That's how you're going to win the prize. Wednesdays, we're going to be talking about music and movies of the decade. It's going to be so much fun because that's some of my favorite stuff from each decade is that pop culture. And it's going to be a blast. Thursdays, we're going to be talking about top fashion and styles and trends of the decade. And then Friday will, of course, stay with the theme of what we do on Project Joy Live, and that is Fun Friday. And we're going to be talking about our favorite things from the decade and also invite you to join us as well. So that gives you a chance to get your eyeshadow going, tease up your hair, do whatever goes with the decade and join us live on air to share some of your favorite moments from the decade. So are you ready for what will be an incredible week? I hope you are, because I'm super pumped. This is going to be a lot of fun. Susan's out there. She's like, rad. Absolutely. That's what's happening here. It's all going to be totally tubular and rad. Okay. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you will be joining us. So today we're going to break down the top news stories of the 80s. But before we get to that, I want to share with you about the national days today, as we always do. So let's do that now. In national days today, now this stuff's been going on a while, so it probably was happening back in the 80s too, though some of them are newer national days as well. I kind of dig this because it is National Start Over Day. It reminds you that it's perfectly fine to start over. Today's national day is about making the decision to accept failure and start over from scratch. And I find this really interesting actually, because as I was researching for the top 80s news stories for this episode, one of the things that I recognize is that a lot of the challenges that we face today actually started brewing back in the 80s. So I found that really, really interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about that coming up. But also there are a lot of things that we're still clearly working on, right? And so I think this is a great reminder for National Start Over Day that we can start over and try again anytime. If at first you don't succeed, then try again. All of us seem to have heard it one time or another in our lives. We can all agree it has been used to inspire us to never give up and keep trying. Today, we want to remind everyone, despite any setbacks you may have, don't give up. Keep going, even if that means starting over. So I love that. Is there anything in your life that you feel like you just want to scrap it and start from fresh? Let me know, because I think about that often. I am definitely a new beginnings kind of person. I've talked about that before. I love a morning, a Monday, a new year, a birthday, any kind of vibe that allows you to start fresh. So this is actually a great reminder to me that we can start fresh at any time, right? It's also World Environment Day, the day we set aside to encourage awareness and action to protect the natural environment. It draws attention to environmental issues such as marine pollution, air pollution, deforestation, and wildlife crime such as poaching. I love that. It's always a good day to think about Mother Earth and our impact on her. It's also, I can get behind this, you guys. We talk about a lot of food days on this show, and I mentioned that I'm plant-based, so there's actually a lot that I don't mention. However, it is officially National Veggie Burger Day. I can get behind this. When it comes to combining flavor and plant power, National Veggie Burger Day on June 5th proclaims it can be done. Packed with flavor, protein, and nutrients, veggie burgers show up at backyard barbecues, always at ours, tailgate parties, and on the menus of high-class restaurants. Grill them, fry them, or bake them. Layer all your favorite toppings like onion, tomato, lettuce, cheese, plant cheese, ketchup, and mustard between a crusty roll or bun and take a big, juicy bite. That's one way to celebrate this flavorful day. I love that. I love it. It's all, you know what I find interesting? It is also National Gingerbread Day. And typically, it's so funny because my youngest has been talking a lot lately about making gingerbread. And I'm like, it's not Christmas because I associate gingerbread with Christmas time. Am I the only one that has that association? I'm lost. I'm lost. But apparently June 5th is National Gingerbread Day. While that may sound strange, on June 5th each year, gingerbread lovers across the country celebrate by sampling their favorite recipes and gingerbread treats. Whether in the form of bread, cakes, bars, biscuits, or cookies, they're delicious any time of year. The term gingerbread originally referred to preserved ginger, later referring to a confection made up of honey and spices. Gingerbread is a sweet food that typically uses honey or molasses rather than just sugar and is flavored with ginger. Gingerbread foods range from a soft, moist loaf cake to something closer to a ginger biscuit. So that's really interesting. Yeah, gingerbread and Christmas. That's how I associate it. But who knew that the National Day was actually the middle of the year on June 5th? Very, very strange to me. But here we are. So no matter what way you celebrate, I hope you celebrate today. And with that, I am so excited to get into with you the top news stories of the 80s because it's the battle of the decades and it's like totally 80s week, dude. Okay. So we're going to do that in just a moment right after this. Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every day for exclusive programming, special events, and a community to call home, where we invite you to explore, change the way you look at and live your life, and go beyond. quite the throwback when technology doesn't work exactly how we want it to. We didn't have a lot of technology like this back in the 80s. Let's say that. Welcome to Back to Project Joy Live. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and we are throwing it back to Totally 80s Week this week as part of our Battle of the Decade series. This is going to be happening all throughout the month of June. We're going to be doing 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, which isn't a huge throwback, but we're going to look back anyways because there's joy there. And of course, there's lessons to be learned. So this is all about nostalgia this month. And I hope you'll be joining us each day. On Mondays each week, we'll be talking about top news of the decade. So today we'll be throwing it back to the top news and biggest stories of the 1980s. The Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union happened between 1980 and 1991. The 1980s marked a critical period in the Cold War with tense relations between the United States and the Soviet Union. The decade witnessed significant events such as the election of Ronald Reagan, the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and ultimately the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. You know, it's interesting. So fun fact, I was actually born in 1981. And some of that stuff is still those phrases, those news stories are still really clear to me from that time, even though I was so young. So it's really interesting to me in going back to that time, how much impact that time really did have on all of us. It mentioned the election of Ronald Reagan. The assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan happened in 1981, March 30th to be specific. President Ronald Reagan was shot and wounded in an assassination attempt by John Hinckley Jr. The incident had a profound impact on Reagan's presidency and prompted discussions about gun control and mental health. Remember, we were talking about how some of the things for National Start Over Day, some of the things that we still see today kind of started bubbling up around that time in the 80s. And so it's wild to me that we are having such deep conversations here. How many years later is this? 30 something years later, guys, or 40, more than 40 years later. About gun control and mental health still. So it's wild to me. And, you know, I wasn't really into history too much in school time, but now I understand what everybody meant by if you don't pay attention to history, it's bound to repeat itself. So it's lessons learned. It's lessons learned, boys and girls, for sure. All right, so going back to our news stories, the Iran-Contra affair happened between 1985 and 1987. This scandal involved the secret sale of weapons to Iran by the Reagan administration in exchange for the release of American hostages held in Lebanon. The proceeds from these arms sales were then covertly funneled to support Contra rebels in Nicaragua, leading to a major political controversy. I seem to remember something similar to this happening in recent years, but it's hard. I don't keep up with politics a whole lot. And so it's something, somebody will have to let me know if this is something, I think something recently happened as well, like within the last 10, 15 years. Maybe it'll come up in our 2010s throwback that we're going to be doing at the final week in June. Who knows? Another thing that's really big on memories from the 1980s was the Challenger space shuttle disaster in 1986. On January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded shortly after liftoff, resulting in the death of all 7 crew members, including school teacher Krista. I cannot pronounce her name, and so my apologies. The tragic incident highlighted the risk of space exploration and raised questions about NASA's safety protocols. A lot of people that I know from that time are able to recall when that happened. A lot of people were in school, the kids at the time, pulled into a special room in the class. They pulled it up on TV and different things like that. Do you remember where you were when the Challenger space shuttle disaster happened? Let me know. Another big event was in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so, if you guys want to hear a little bit more of this from a firsthand account, Daria Nashit was on the Breakthrough Show, Breakthroughs Around the World series this season. And she represented the country of Germany and talked about the fall of the Berlin Wall. And actually, I meet with her each morning to read Dorothy Auger's For Love poem. And she shared a little bit about that this morning and just the energy of the time. And it was a really cool experience. So definitely go check out her episode at thebreakthroughshownetwork.com. But the Berlin Wall, which had divided East and West Germany since 1961, was opened, allowing people to freely cross between the two sides. This symbolic event marked the beginning of the end of the Cold War and set the stage for German reunification. So a really cool thing that happened back then. Also, let's see, the Falklands War in 1982, a conflict between Argentina and the United Kingdom over the disputed Falkland Island, resulted in a 10-week-long war. The British eventually reclaimed the islands, but the conflict had political, military, and economic ramifications for both nations. In addition, the HIV/AIDS epidemic began around 1981 to present day. The 1980s saw the emergence of the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, and the subsequent spread of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS. The epidemic had a profound impact globally, leading to widespread fear, social stigma, and efforts to combat the disease. I remember that really popping up a lot towards the end of the 80s and then going into the 90s when I was in high school. It was talked about a lot, definitely a lot more than I feel like it's talked about today. Let's see, the Solidarity movement in Poland happened from 1980 to 1989. The Solidarity movement, led by Lech Walesa, emerged as a major force for political change in Poland. It challenged the Soviet-backed government and eventually paved the way for democratic reforms in the country. In addition, we had the stock market crash of 1987, also referred to as Black Monday. On October 19th, 1987, global stock markets experienced a significant crash, often referred to as Black Monday. This event saw a rapid decline in stock prices, causing widespread panic and highlighting the vulnerability of financial markets. So lots in the news in the 1980s, of course, and I want to talk to you about a couple more things that were sort of in the pop culture. We'll be getting into some of this coming up on Wednesday's show when we talk about music and movies as well. But the rise of MTV happened in 1981. The launch of MTV Music Television in 1981 revolutionized the way music was consumed and promoted. The channel's 24/7 music video format catapulted artists like Madonna, Prince, and Duran Duran to superstardom, making MTV a cultural phenomenon. So really interesting because MTV has changed a lot since then. I remember when it started really getting into the reality television and things like that. It's not as much, I don't know, not the same as what MTV once was. Let me know if anybody out there still watches MTV. I don't anymore, but I did at the time and it was really cool. In addition, in 1981 was the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana. The royal wedding between Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer captivated the world's attention. The grand ceremony, watched by millions, brought fairy tale glamour and media frenzy to the forefront of pop culture. We also had the Brat Pack phenomenon in the 80s. A group of young actors, including Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Demi Moore, Molly Ringwald, and others, became known as the Brat Pack. Their roles in iconic coming-of-age films like The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire defined a generation and influenced youth culture. In addition, the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985 happened. The release of NES by Nintendo revolutionized the home video game industry. Titles like Super Mario Brothers, I'm going to throw in Duck Hunt there because it was a whole vibe, okay? You guys play Duck Hunt? Let me know. The Legend of Zelda and Meteoroid became instant classics, shaping the gaming landscape and laying the foundation for future console gamings. I love that. So lots of good memories from the 80s. Let me know out of all those, which things stick out to you the most? Which things do you remember? Which things are top of mind? And do you bring to the forefront of your mind today for some joy also, or as for the catalyst of change? I want to talk to you about a couple influential people in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan was the 40th president of the United States. Reagan's conservative policies and leadership style had a significant impact on the 1980s. His economic policies, known as Reaganomics, aimed to stimulate economic growth through tax cuts and deregulation, while his strong stance against communism helped shape the political landscape of the decade. In addition, Gorbachev served as the general secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1985 to 1991. His policies of glasnost, openness, or restructuring brought significant changes to the Soviet Union and ultimately led to the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Pope John Paul II, as the head of the Roman Catholic Church from 1978 to 2005, he played a crucial role in world affairs during the 1980s. His visits to various countries, including his native Poland, helped inspire political change and resistance against communist regimes. Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Inc., Steve Jobs played a pivotal role in shaping the technology landscape of the 1980s. Under his leadership, Apple introduced game-changing products such as the Macintosh computer and the iconic Macintosh graphical user interface, setting the stage for future innovation. I remember going to a class where, and it might have been late 80s or very, very early 90s with the Mac computer and learning to move this little turtle around the screen. Does anybody remember that? Like you would have to put in different numbers and then and the turtle would move certain ways. It was a really cool thing, but that was just quite the memory compared to what we have today. Margaret Thatcher, as the first female prime minister of the United Kingdom, Thatcher's conservative policies and uncompromising leadership style left a lasting impact on both British policies and global affairs. Her economic reforms, known as Thatcherism, aimed to reduce the role of the state and promote free market capitalism. Michael Jackson, often referred to as the king of pop, Michael Jackson dominated the music scene in the 1980s. His album Thriller became the best-selling album of all time, and his innovative music videos and dance move revolutionized the entertainment industry. Oprah Winfrey, through her highly influential talk show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, became one of the most influential media personalities of the 1980s. Her ability to connect with audiences, address important social issues, and promote literature and self-help books shaped popular culture and made her a powerful force in the media landscape. Nelson Mandela, although imprisoned for most of the 1980s, Nelson Mandela's advocacy for racial equality and opposition to apartheid in South Africa had profound impact. His release in 1990 and subsequent role in negotiations for a democratic South Africa positioned him as a symbol of resilience and reconciliation. As we've already mentioned her, Princess Diana, through her philanthropic efforts and humanitarian work, became a global icon of compassion and empathy. Her high-profile charity engagements and personal struggles brought attention to important social issues, making her one of the most influential figures of the 1980s. Do you guys have any other figures from the 1980s that stand out in your mind other than the ones I mentioned? There were tons, and I'm sure we'll be mentioning a lot more as the weeks go on through this Battle of the Decade series. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the top news stories, not movies, that's Wednesday, news stories and figures of the 1980s. And we are going to be right back after this to talk about birthdays, because it's what we do at the end of the show. We'll be right back after this. Like, totally don't go anywhere, okay? We have lots of birthdays to celebrate, as we always do today in the celebrity world. One of my boyfriends in my mind, Mark Wahlberg, is 52 years old today. Happy birthday to the amazing Marky Mark. Pete Wentz from Fall Out Boy has a birthday today. Brian McKnight, another fabulous singer that I love so much, he has a birthday today, 54 years old. Kenny G is 67 years old. You might remember his iconic soprano sax music that filled our lives as we would go to the dentist's office and things like that. Liza Wheel from Gilmore Girls and How to Get Away with Murder, among other things, has a birthday today. In the celebrities in my life, Mo Azuna has a birthday today. And Uncle Kevin, my Uncle Kevin Cushing, has a birthday today as well. So with that, let us get our birthday song on. Are you ready for it? Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mark Wahlberg, Pete Wentz, Brian McKnight, Kenny G, Liza Wheel, Mo Azuna, and Uncle Kevin Cushing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to all those who have a birthday today and are celebrating, and to everyone that had a birthday over the weekend. I hope you had an incredible weekend and are enjoying your day today as well. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for the start of our Battle of the Decade series. This is totally 80s week here on Project Joy Live, so I hope you'll join us each and every day. Tomorrow, guys, is going to be super fun because we have trivia. Tomorrow, I'll be joined by Brandon Croucher. We're going to be doing 80s trivia, and it's going to be so much fun because you can win a prize if you participate in the comments. Okay, so make sure you do that as we go through the episode tomorrow. On Wednesday, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about music and movies. Thursday, we'll be talking about top fashion and trends of the 80s. And Friday will be Fun Friday, where you'll be allowed to join us live on air. I encourage you to get your neon on, your leg warmers, your Walkman, tease your hair, all the good stuff, and come and join us live on air to share your favorite moments from the 80s and have some fun with us as well. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to thank you for being here today and remind you to make joy a priority in your life today and every day. And stay rad. I'll see you tomorrow.